So Steven, you have co-authored this book, Who's Bigger? What motivated the study?
So I'm a computer scientist and I'm interested in analyzing large data sets. And one data set that's very interesting is Wikipedia. Wikipedia has articles on over 500,000 different people. And it becomes interesting to try to look at a data set like that and see what it can tell us about the relative influence or significance or meme strength of different people.
So now Jesus of Nazareth came in at number 1, and obviously you've ranked from there. How did you rank them? Because that sounds like an incredibly difficult thing to do.
So what our methodology was that we took different measurements. We tried to extract different measurements from Wikipedia that would be relevant to what you would consider to be fame or the degree to which someone is influential. One would be how long somebody's article is. If you were comparing two people and one person had a long encyclopedia article and one person had a short encyclopedia article, the one with the longer one is probably, some kind of vote that they are probably a more significant figure. The one that has a page that is read more often, if we look at how many times each Wikipedia page is read, the one that is read more often is probably associated with a figure that's more interesting, influential, significant in some sense than one whose page is read less often. If you look at someone whose page is central in that it's linked to by other important people, okay, this is this notion of page rank that kind of drives the Google search engine. If your page is linked to by the pages of other important people, you're probably an important person. If you have an article that a lot of people are editing the page so that they feel they have a lot to contribute to, you are probably a more significant, more interesting, more influential person. And so what our method basically did was extract these basic measurements from Wikipedia for every person who has a page there, and then did a statistical analysis of these kind of things to get some kind of some kind of sense about them.
So there was not really a value judgment. You weren't kind of saying that we believe this person has more value than somebody else.
This is not a question of value judgment. Adolf Hitler ranked something like 6th or 7th, and obviously there is no value judgment there. This is a measurement of what we would call meme strength. Memes are kind of ideas that kind of can be thought of as passing through history the way genes pass through history. And we're measuring in some sense the strength of what are the names that are doing the best job they can propagating through history. And that's kind of, I guess, the basic measurement that we're trying to get.
So Steven, why did you think that religious leaders like Jesus rated so highly?
Well, religious leaders like Jesus and Muhammad have, literally 1 billion followers. And these followers, among other things, help propagate their name through history. They're interested in reading about the religious leaders. They are one of the reasons why the religious leaders are ranked very highly is they tend to get a lot of edits to their Wikipedia pages because they have very intense followings, not only very large followings, but very intense followings. And there's a large number of people who are interested in them. People name their children after these religious leaders, and these names propagate through history. So, and they tend to be associated with a lot of other influential people. So if you found a major religion, there's other figures, who follow you, and there tend to be very strong links to these other very important people.
Did the Caesars of Jesus' time, did they rate at all?
So the question is, where were the leading Roman emperors of that time? And, someone like Augustus, if I remember correct, ranked in like around the 50th position or so. And there are other figures from the ancient world who ranked very well, someone like Alexander the Great, who was presumably earlier than that. So several of the Roman emperors were important. Julius Caesar, I think himself may have ranked around 20th, come to think of it. But the religious leaders probably figures have more active followings, and in some sense their let's say reputations and names are presumably kept more alive than it would be the classic rulers of Rome.
Do you think that this list will change? If you did this in 20 years' time, do you think this list would change at all?
If you do the list, do the analysis 20 years from time, there's probably going to be minor fluctuations, but my guess is at the top of the list, things are pretty stable. That, the same people will continue to have articles that are probably well read. They will have articles that are linked to by important people. They will have, people editing their articles if there's new developments about them. So my instinct is that these people, their reputation is probably going to be fairly stable.
So Stephen, were you surprised at all by what you saw?
You know, the thing that I was most pleased with our rankings was how little I was surprised by them, in the sense that, you know, that they generally reflect, they're supposed to reflect in some sense what is the, you know, the ethos, the public sense of how important these figures are. And it should not have surprised anyone that, you know, analyzing an English language Wikipedia, that Jesus came in as the top figure. And in general, when I looked at these analyses, for the most part, there's people who, you know, ranking roughly where I thought they were. There were obviously quibbles and surprises and artifacts, and sometimes a method isn't perfect. But in general, you know, I felt our rankings were I was pretty happy with where our rankings were. They did kind of convey my sense in general of, you know, where these people are in the public thinking.
I know in your book there's one part of a chapter that actually talks about the difference between gravitas and celebrity, which goes to your methodology, because it's kind of interesting to work out what's the difference between someone who's, you know, an entertainer like, or a celebrity like Kim Kardashian and someone who's a politician like Hillary Clinton today. So
right.
How did you, is there a way that you kind of tried to span that?
The way we did this was through, again, how do we do our general analysis? We extracted various values from Wikipedia that would go to measuring how important or how well known a figure was. Things like how often their page is read, how long their page is, what their page rank is, how central are they in the network of historical figures, how central are they in the network of all Wikipedia pages. And once we had these measurements, we did a method called statistical factor analysis to try to identify a small number of underlining factors or reasons why these measurements, which would sort of explain these measurements. And it turned out that there were two factors that were important that popped out of this method. And one seemed to be associated with popular celebrity, okay? That's where the Kardashians and the rock stars would tend to weigh higher. And this was basically based on things like how many times their pages were read, okay? How many times their pages were edited. These were typically associated more with what was, you know, we kind of captured as celebrity. And then there was another factor that seemed to be better associated with what we would think more of as his historical importance. And this would be loading on these different forms of page rank primarily. And when you look at it, it does do, but I think, a pretty good job of breaking down what we would consider to be high celebrity figures, okay, like entertainers, from high gravitas figures like political leaders and religious leaders and the like.
What this series is called Jesus the Game Changer, and that's kind of the motivation behind the series. In that statistical analysis, is there anything that you can point to the same, yeah, I really think that Jesus was a game changer because? Was there anything that you picked up in that? You know, our methods really don't go into things like because, okay? They go into, you know, measurements of what do we observe, you know? So it's more a measurement fundamentally of how strong are these memes, more so than why are they there. But again, religious leaders do very well by our measurements. I told you Jesus was in the top 10, it was number 1. Muhammad, if I remember correct, was number 3. You know, religious leaders have big followings. They have a lot of people who are interested in them. They have teachings that many people, billions of people around the world follow. And so, you know, I think that is an excellent way to propagate your name through history, is to found a major religion. We're in Central Park here, Stephen. One of the things that you said was your list is actually represented around this park. Who are some of the people on your list that are actually here in Central Park? Yeah, so Christopher Columbus is in Central Park. He's right down there, and he ranked 20th on our list. The poet Robert Burns has a statue down there. He ranked 317th. Sir Walter Scott, who was another poet who's down there, is 518th. The least significant person to have a statue in Central Park is a guy named Fitzgreen Halleck, who ranked by our measure 38,709th. What did he do, Stephen? He was a very minor poet. He was a writer of the time that was, you know, presumably was popular and had a following in his time, yes, but has, you know, been lost to history now. We shouldn't be too dismissive of his 38,000th rating. 38,000th is quite good. You know, there's he's probably ahead of us. He's well ahead of us. He's well ahead of us. I have a page in Wikipedia, and I am certainly down around 500,000th or so. So
He's quite a bit ahead of us. And finally, I guess William Shakespeare is down there. He ranked number 4 in our analysis.
Interesting, isn't it, that obviously Central Park just picked up the poets, but the kind of arts and poets are influential and continue to be.
Yeah, so if you have, if you're an author whose works are read, then obviously as your works are read, your name is passed through history. If you are an author who stops being read, like Mr. Fritz Green Halleck, okay, your name sort of stops being passed through, and the strength of your meme sort of drops considerably.
Yeah.
So being associated with a book that a lot of people read, like presumably the Bible, okay, is a good way to propagate your name through history.
Yeah. And so this study is a wonderful way to just get a snapshot of influence in our community.
It's a snapshot of who people are caring about, okay, and who are the names that people are caring about, who are they reading about, who are they interested in knowing more about. And that, I think that our method does a good job highlighting.
I was interested that you said before that you actually got a bit of negative feedback, and it was actually out of people who thought their people should be higher up. Who are those that did that?
Again, I would hear from people, when our book was released and our rankings were published, we got a lot of press around the world, and most countries' articles said that their country's person wasn't ranked high enough, okay? Again, we are analyzing the English language Wikipedia, which obviously is going to be biased to people in Western culture. If you analyze the Arabic Wikipedia, Jesus is not going to be number 1. Muhammad will be number 1. If you analyze the Chinese Wikipedia, Mao Zedong is going to be number 1. But if you analyze the English language Wikipedia, you get a pretty good representation of people around the world, but it obviously is going to be concentrating on people who are of interest in Western culture.